Well, the time is just gone 3 minutes past 8 on this Friday morning, and on the Friday edition of News and Views, we're going across to be joined by crime expert and IRS Forensic Investigations CEO, Chet Thomas, lawyers at police stations. Chet, good morning to you as always, and welcome to the show.
Very good morning to you, Inayat, and a blessed Jummah Mubarak to all the listeners and viewers on this blessed Friday.
Thank you very much, Chet. Chet, this is quite interesting, talking about lawyers being present at police stations. And the point I made during my introduction is we're not too certain in terms of how many successful prosecutions are there and how many have actually been thrown out as a result of bad information that is contained in dockets that obviously result in low rates of criminal prosecutions.
So let's break down the most serious of crimes, which is the most reported crime because there's an actual body, and that's murder. You'll find other cases tend to be unreported, whether it's GBVF, whether it's assault, whether it's robbery, insurance fraud, that type of thing. Those are generally unreported. But what does go reported is murder because there's an actual body. When the NPA came out earlier this year and gave their statistics in respect of successful prosecutions of murder cases, they gave an incredible statistic of a 74% success rate. But that is an extremely disingenuous figure, and I'll tell you why. That is 74% of cases that the National Prosecuting Authority have found fit to enroll. In other words, there was a thorough investigation, and they felt comfortable enough to enroll the docket because they believed there was a prospect of a successful prosecution. What that means, in essence, is that the majority of the cases are not enrolled because during the investigation phase, a thorough investigation was not done. Ballistics reports were outstanding. Pathology reports were outstanding. Suspects were not identified. Suspects were not tracked and traced. And that's because there are not enough detectives. There are not enough skills within our detective services at this point in time. So when you look at the true statistics, it's now emerges that 1 out of every 10 murders that are reported are actually resulting in a successful prosecution. So the 74% from the NPA is in terms of cases that they've enrolled. It's not in terms of cases that have been registered. The 1 in 10 successes is in terms of cases that are actually registered and reach the stage of going to court. That is a frightening statistic. It means that 9 out of every 10 murderers still walk amongst us.
Well, certainly. In fact, Ted, I think, like you said, 1 in 10, 10%, extremely low. But let's just talk about, the docket itself, because I know you speak about, all sorts of reports that possibly are missing, or the lack of human resources, or possibly even lack of training could be a problem. Now, looking at this initiative talking about lawyers in police stations, and this is a project between the South African Police Services and the Global Initiative Against Transitional Organized Crime. Would that be the route to go?
Yes, it's a pilot project that's been rolled out in the Western Cape. They've started with 2 police stations. Mark Shaw is at the forefront of international organized crime studies, and he was actually in Parliament recently in respect of the committee that's hearing from victims of gang violence on the Cape Flats. And this initiative has been introduced together with the provincial commissioner, together with the MEC of Safety and Security, together with the Minister Kachalia. I think it's a very important development, and I'll tell you why. I've always spoken about the fact that South Africa has immense human capital that goes unutilized. We have the situation where we've got a lot of graduates, but they don't have experience, and that counts against them. When we look at last year's applications for 5,000 posts within the South African Police Service, over 900,000 people applied for those posts, of which just under half, around 400,000, had degrees. They were graduates. That just shows how many graduates are unemployed. And a lot of those graduates are legal studies, are accounting studies, and they could be exceptionally beneficial to the state. Also social workers. So what I called for quite some time now is a national service of sorts, like we see for medical graduates. Medical graduates have to give up a year once they've qualified. They get a stipend, they get sent to rural hospitals, they get sent to rural areas, and no matter what medical practice or discipline they're in, they get to contribute their national service. At the same time, they get experience. We need to see the same applied across the board when it comes to accounting students that can help with financial threat analysis and assist prosecutors and detectives. And of course, legal graduates can be in police stations to assist with the more complex cases. You must remember that there's a lot of jargon that goes into different kinds of cases, especially when you're talking about financial crimes. And it would be impossible to expect a station police officer working in a client service center to understand every type of sophisticated crime that's taking place and to be able to detail it in a statement. Hence, the use of university graduates who are used to research, who can research the crime and assist in the compilation of that statement, will go a long way in having that case registered, having that docket allocated correctly, and having that case escalated where necessary to a specialized unit. It all starts at the beginning. If that statement is taken down wrong, if the facts are not there, if the evidence pack isn't built correctly, that case is going to go nowhere. So I see no harm in bringing in these attorneys. In fact, they don't have to be attorneys. They can be varsity grads that have qualified, and they can be doing this as national service, get a stipend, get experience, and then perhaps be employed by the state at a later stage or be employed by the private sector. At least they're getting the experience, and at least our victims of crime are getting their statements done correctly.
Yes, Jed, what I also find interesting is this initiative speaks to legal mentorship and training for SAPs, for detectives, for people that are actually involved in investigating the crime or even preparing the docket. And just, how important or how relevant is this in terms of the mentorship and the training? Because it does appear as if this is where one of the problem is as well. And as you mentioned, one cannot expect them to know anything and everything, basically, whether we're talking about legal, whether we're talking about finance, whatever we're talking about. But that mentorship, that training is absolutely critical.
It is critical. We've got a number of issues at hand that haven't been discussed as much in the public domain as they should be. The one is that we've got this huge attrition of qualified detectives. A lot of them are taking early pension at 55. A lot of them are leaving to join the private sector. A lot of them are disillusioned because they have lack of resources and capacity to enable them to complete their investigations. They're also under immense stress. They're carrying 2 to 3 times the amount of dockets that they should be carrying. What we found exceptionally peculiar and disturbing was 2 years ago, the 300 odd new Hawks members that were introduced to try to bolster the ranks of the Hawks were all constables straight out of police college. Now, to be a detective in a specialized unit, normally you would have had to start in a client service center. You'd have to do vispol patrols, normal policing, work your way up to detective, and spend at least 8 years in policing before you were considered for a specialized unit. You've got members coming straight out of police college, zero experience in policing, zero experience in detective work, no relationships or networks with prosecutors, no understanding of the subpoena process, thrown in the deep end. It's not their fault. It's that there's a critical lack of manpower that are detective orientated within our policing service at this point in time. Also, we've had an abundance of change in legislation. So your existing detectives may not be up to date with the Cyber Crimes Act, GitLab, other acts that have been amended or changed because of our grey listing, like the FICA. What FICA can now do from the financial intelligence perspective in respect of assisting in AI reports on bank accounts and contra accounts used for money laundering. The fact that they can subpoena using the Fabric platform now to expedite the Section 205 subpoena process to get bank statements from the courts. So all of this, from a learnership and mentorship perspective, can also not just benefit the public who are coming in to make cases, but also the members themselves from a learning perspective.
Well, certainly, Ched. Ched, we're going to go for a quick ad break. I'm going to put you on hold. We'll come back. There's just some critical issues I think that we still need to cover because this is, as you mentioned, it's a pilot project, but it is also a groundbreaking development as far as policing is concerned, and particularly when it comes to investigations and prosecutions. So if you just, bear with me, we'll put you on hold.
Thank you.
It's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying, or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
Right now, over 150 million children around the world are orphaned, facing hunger, hardship, and uncertainty. With Islamic Relief's Orphan Sponsorship Program, you can provide a child with access to education, nutritious food, essential healthcare, and a safe home. Your sponsorship is not just support, it's hope, security, and a brighter future. Be the reason an orphan child smiles again. Sponsor an orphan today with Islamic Relief.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Are you banking with convenience, transparency, and flexibility? With Al Baraka Bank's transactional banking account, you can enjoy convenient everyday banking designed around your needs. Benefit from zero fees on point-of-sale transactions and manage your banking easily through Al Baraka's secure mobile banking app and internet banking platform. From everyday payments to managing your personal or business banking, Al Baraka makes banking simple, transparent, and convenient. Visit albaraka.co.za to learn more. Al Baraka, your partner bank. Al Baraka Bank Limited is an authorized financial services and credit provider.
Gaza needs your support more than ever. Homes have been shattered and families have lost everything. With your support, our teams are delivering clean water tankers, feeding the hungry, and assisting orphans who have no one left. Let us give Gaza whatever help we can. African Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Well, the time is just gone 16 minutes past 8 as we continue with my guest this morning, Chet Thomas, a crime expert in IRS Forensic Investigation CEO. Chet, just to continue, and we are living in an age where we find that many crimes are becoming a lot more sophisticated, whether we're talking about cyber crimes and any other forms of crimes. And what we were talking about early on in terms of the type of training and detectives coming fresh, out of college or with very little training. And in terms of decision making, because I think this is absolutely critical in terms of whether to prosecute or whether not to prosecute, whether you have a case to prosecute, whether you don't have. And to a large extent, I think that decision is being taken these days by prosecutors. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, and the prosecutor will then decide whether there is a case or not. But coming back to this initiative in terms of how this would actually assist in the prosecution's case, and again, taking off pressure from prosecutors, and so that by the time the docket gets to them, they've basically got everything, all bases are basically covered.
So there's a number of issues that always concern me when it comes to opening a docket at the local police station. You can open a docket anywhere in the country, and that docket, it is the responsibility of the police station to transfer it to the correct jurisdiction. But in an ideal world, you'll open the case in the area in which you reside or where the case, where the crime took place. If you go to a police station and you advise them that the crime took place somewhere else, perhaps you're on holiday, invariably they'll turn you away and tell you to go open it elsewhere, which is incorrect. They have to open the docket, but it's a way of getting less dockets into the system because station management want to have their statistics kept low. The second thing they'll try to tell you if it's a complex financial crime is that the case is civil and you should rather go to an attorney and follow civil process. Again, this is to keep the stats low, and sometimes the member may not understand it. And the third issue, which is particularly concerning, is that the police officer at the charge office has been taught that they have to write down the statement in their handwriting and then you must sign it. And that is also incorrect. The standing order says that a police officer may take down the person's statement, the person must check the contents and then they can sign it, or if a statement is presented that is typed in the correct format, it has to be accepted. All that has to happen is it has to be commissioned in the police station. Now, when it's a complex crime, imagine coming in with bundles of documentation, lever arch files, and asking a member who's now been instructed to write out pages upon pages upon pages of a statement rather than them just accepting your typed version. So it's another way for them to get rid of potential cases and forcing those cases into the civil system. It's ironic that this is happening at station level, and it's because detective commanders are telling the VISPOL members, do whatever you can not to open cases. Our members are overburdened. If you have somebody within the charge office, or they now call it the client service center, who can articulate the victim statement correctly in the correct format, it will go a long way to having a prosecutor being able to read that, understand that, and to then give the necessary instructions on the C-clip, which is the investigation diary, because what the way our criminal justice system works in South Africa is a case becomes prosecutorial guided. In other words, the prosecutor knows what the elements of the crime are that need to be proven. So before they enroll it, they give instructions to the investigating officers in the investigation diary. And remember, they're not going to even consider a docket and write up an investigation diary for further instructions if that initial statement doesn't highlight exactly what the crime was all about. So it is a critical aspect to be able to articulate correctly in a statement what transpired to ensure that the case is registered, and for the police members themselves to stop trying to find every excuse to turn victims away from the police station and not to open cases.
Yes, and also, Ched, you are on record of making a statement, and obviously you've welcomed this project and saying that, the legal expertise at these police stations could provide an important layer of oversight. And so it's not only about assisting victims, it's not only about getting the dockets right and making sure that, you've got a tight, a watertight case. It's also oversight, because I think this is also lacking in many police stations.
Definitely, and the Western Cape has tried to lead from the front when it comes to oversight. They were the first, and they're still the only province in South Africa to have an independent ombud. At this point in time, it's retired General Oswald Reddy, who's an ex-senior SAPS member who now sits as the ombud. Prior to him was Rusi Piccoli, a very well-experienced prosecutor and ex-head of the NDPP. And they are now leading from the front again in respect to the introduction of having lawyers at police stations, or legal graduates, I prefer to say, at police stations. It hasn't really helped as much as we would like to think in respect to the ombud, because there's still massive corruption, massive incidences of violent crime in the Western Cape. But having that ombud has helped to a certain extent. And unlike having to wait for IPID, who are under resources, or the Office of the DPCI Judge, or the Office of the Inspector General of Intelligence, the ombud has played a key role. And we hope that the attorneys also start playing a key role, and that other provinces learn from what these pilot projects in the Western Cape are doing. One of the other pilot projects that the Western Cape wants to introduce, should the Constitution be changed and the Police Act be changed, is to give more powers to the Metropolitan Police, to the local law enforcement, that they also have investigative powers, so that they can take away some of the burden from the South African Police Service in respect of the massive backlog of investigations.
Yes. Jed, how do you see this actually playing out and looking at obviously the criminal justice system? Ultimately, obviously this is where it's going to end up as far as the courts are concerned. But just generally looking at this pilot project and very innovative, I must say, and with the Western Cape taking the lead. But in terms of how this is likely to possibly transform whether we're talking at a police level, at an investigations level, at a prosecutions level, and just the entire criminal justice system as a whole.
There has to be buy-in from the policing at all levels. There has to be buy-in from the provincial safety and security MECs. There has to be buy-in from the local MMCs at the respective municipalities. And of course, there has to be community buy-in. And I don't see the community not buying into this. It's a positive change having somebody there that understands the legal system. We need to be able to introduce systems that are going to fast track. We need to look at budget. Budget is critical in all of this, and these different departments are going to have to come together. We also need social workers at every single police station, especially on the Cape Flats, informal settlements, decaying CBDs, and areas where there's a lot of vulnerable people, where we see an excess of GBV and gang violence. So we don't just need attorneys, we also need social workers. And we can apply the English model to this, where they've got family liaison officers that assist families during these very traumatic times where a child is lost, somebody's murdered, somebody's raped, whatever the case may be. So we need to change. The police system hasn't really changed in decades. What really upsets me is in the year 2000, they wanted to introduce a digitized docket system. And they started buying the equipment. They started to scan in the A1s, and they wanted to have this new digitized system, similar to the civil courts have case lines. We're now sitting 26 years later, we still don't have a digital system. We're still relying on paper dockets. And invariably, if the docket goes missing, the case falls flat. So we need to look at the way money is spent. At the moment, the budget's 100 billion rand per annum. It's increasing to 140 billion rand per annum, but 80% of that goes towards human capital. In other words, towards salaries. We've also got very top-heavy leadership, full colonels, brigadiers, and generals that are chowing, and I hate to use the word chow, but they're chowing a lot of money in terms of salaries. And there's something wrong with the system. We need to reset the police, and it starts with small changes like the introduction of social workers at police station level, like the introduction of lawyers to ensure that cases do become prosecutable.
Well, Jed, I must say, quite an interesting discussion and quite enlightening as well at the same time. And let's just see, I'm sure we will have a discussion at some point in time to see how this pilot project actually progresses and the success rates as well. But I'm sure you will keep us in touch and keep us in the loop. But for now, have yourself a wonderful day and a great weekend as well. All the best to you, Jed.
Shukran. Thank you so much.
Chet Thomas with us this morning, crime expert, and this is groundbreaking actually in terms of the pilot project. And I think this is many of us are impacted and affected by what we see taking place at our local police stations, particularly when we know that we have become victims of crime and we are expecting results. We are expecting successful prosecutions, and many of us end up being disappointed as a result of a number of issues and a whole host of issues that Ched has been actually talking about. So this is something that we certainly will follow. Let's see how that pilot project actually works out in the Western Cape. But more importantly, if it does work, what are the powers that be going to do about it? How is this going to impact on policing, on prosecutions, on the justice system, on a national level, and how this can actually be rolled out? And as Ched mentioned, 20 odd years ago, we've been talking about digital dockets, and that still hasn't taken off the ground. So that alone speaks volumes. The time is just gone, 8:27. We're going to go for a break. We come back. We'll be joined by Surya Dadu.
With